Deconverted Man here. Welcome to my information exchange dialogue about ethics. Ethics is defined as moral principles that govern a person or group behavior, the branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles, and a set of moral principles, especially ones relating to or affirming a specific group, field, or form of conduct. Morals are defined as a lesson, especially one concerning what is right or prudent, that can be derived from a story, a piece of information, or an experience, and a person's standards of behavior or belief concerning what is and what is not acceptable for them to do. I think morals rely and must have ethics to form and to function, and I will present you with why I think that is in this presentation. We can form and construct thought experiments and base ideas off of those thought experiments, write them down in a book or two for later use. Experiments such as this have been done, and it's worth looking at them because it does tell us more about ourselves and our society. So a train is coming out of control, and there's a switch to switch the track. Along its path are 10 people. The side track has one person. Do you switch the track, killing the one person but saving the 10? Most people, when asked this question, will save the 10 people in favor of the one. However, when we change the question slightly, we get a different answer. A train is coming out of control, and there's a large fat person that you can push out in front of it. Their mass will stop the train before it hits 10 people. Do you shove the large fat person in front of the train? Most people, when asked this question, will say no, because there seems to be some thing in our brain that says, I don't want to physically harm a human being. With the switch lever, even though it's a thought experiment in our minds, there seems to be a balking at actually being more involved in the killing of somebody. This, I think, does tell us a lot about how we as an individual think about things and how we as a society think about things. Now, were you faced with that situation in real life, maybe you would kill the person in an attempt to save the 10. Of course, there's more options available in real life, but the thought experiment is meant to be able to produce an answer that we can then use to see what people generally feel or think about given situations. A more realistic test can be performed. In the movie Captain America, a general throws a grenade into a group of soldiers and they all dive out of the way except for the soon-to-be captain, who throws himself onto the grenade and warns everyone else away, expecting to give his life to save others. It can be said fairly that courage doesn't show up on any tests or paper or even in thought experiments. You have no idea if you will be one of the people to jump out of the way or the one to jump onto the grenade. Even though in the end the grenade was a fake, the test subjects do not know this, so to them the test is real life. So it seems we have to recognize the limits of thought experiments. Although they do teach us something about ourselves and our society, whatever answers we have will help us understand ourselves and our society better. But there is this limitation of not knowing how you would perform in real life until you are exposed to that. And of course, this scenario, by the way, that was in the movie, has been done in real life, but the grenade was real. There's been multiple times where people have been in a grenade range and a grenade accidentally fell down and somebody threw themselves on it, killing themselves to save others. And this has happened in the battlefield as well. So that's an action of extraordinary bravery. I have no idea whether or not I would be brave enough to do that. Don't know until you're in that situation. So there is a limit. But there's still a worthwhile endeavor to learn about these things because it does tell us something about ourselves. So we can come up with endless thought experiments, writing them all down and the answers to see what the typical response is. This is a part of ethics, but not all of it. Ethics is a system of choosing, of being able to ask questions. Do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, or does the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many? When? Why? Where? And how? Do I take a bullet to save someone else, or do I save myself? Do I stand for freedom and equality, risking my own freedom and equality while doing so? Do I risk my safety to help somebody else? These are not easy questions, but answering them helps us to know what we want to do, not what we will do. Once we have all this worked out, we have our morals. They're kept in our heads somewhere, floating around, if you will, waiting for the moment of action. And we have no idea if we will or will not follow our own morals, but they're there, and we feel bad if we go against our own morality. So someone might ask, and I think rightfully so, what's the point of ethics or morals if you're never sure what your action will be when the time comes? I don't really know if there's a good answer for that. Only that ethics and morals do influence our choices to a minor or major extent, and it seems that we're better off with them than we are without them. Our understanding of ethics and morals and how both function or might not function help us to understand ourselves and others better, and this understanding might help us make even better ethics and morals in the long run. Now that I've spoken some on ethics and morals, let me address a little bit about human behavior, for this too is part of ethics and morals and show us how limited we really are as individuals. The Milgram experiment was devised shortly after the war trial of Hitler to try to make sense of why so many people followed the rule, the command of somebody. Although arguments have been made that the experiment didn't really give us a close enough link to the events, it does show us, I think, how humans behave in the face of authority figures. So the experiment goes basically like this. The participants are told that they're supposed to teach someone a variety of different things. The person is someone they don't get to see. They're behind a wall, who is in fact an actor. Then they're given a box that supposedly electrifies the person behind the wall in increasing dosages every time they fail to ask or answer the question correctly. And since it's an actor, they always fail, and thus the teacher, which is the person that's unaware of what's going on, always has to increase the voltage. And should they ever say that they want to stop, then the person that's running the whole thing tells them that they should keep going, and that they must keep going, in other words of commands, but only a limited amount of time. It was only 4 times in this particular experiment. And then after the 4th time, if they say, I want to stop, they were allowed to stop. What's interesting is that even those who did stop never asked the people to stop running the entire experiment, and even felt inclined to ask permission to check on the person behind the wall. Ask permission to see if they're okay! And the person's yelling and banging on the walls every time they get zapped. And they even increased the experiment by sometimes they would have the actors tell them that they had a heart condition or mention that at some point, and sometimes they didn't. So it told us a lot. What it told us is that people will follow orders from authority figures even though their morals are against doing that. We don't want to cause harm to people, typically speaking. But here were everyday people doing the very thing that they thought that they would never do because they were being told to do it. What that means for ethics is alarming. It means that our ability to ask the questions that ethic needs for it to function seems to dim out or expire under orders from authority. It seems then that authority can destroy or diminish greatly ethics and thus morals. With that in mind, I turn to DCT, Divine Command Theory, the idea that a god or gods have issued commands, and it's called a theory because it tries to explain why we have such commands, I suppose. But nonetheless, let's consider DCT. DCT proposed that at least one god has said, do this or do not do that, and we must follow it. Why would we not follow it? What choice do we really have? Not only do we have the diminished aspect of authority at work here, but we have what I dare say would be considered the ultimate authority by most, a god. How could we say no to anything it told us to do? Thus, DCT is orders we must follow, and as a result, we have no ability to ask questions. Ethics is destroyed, and with it, morals. DCT removes the need of ethics. It simply says do or do not the various things it says. Simply put, ethics and morals no longer exist in such a system. For we have our orders. We must carry them out. No exceptions, no questions, just follow them, period. We cannot ask whether or not it's good or not good to do X, for X is commanded, and that ends all discussion about it. Those that proclaim that morals are objective because a god issues command fail to see that if a god did in fact issue commands, that morals no longer exist at all, just the orders that the deity has issued. Now, you might say that it seems a far simpler system. We no longer have to figure out if a given action is good or bad, right or wrong. We simply follow a set of instructions. And I suppose it makes for very good robot behavior, and it might in fact be a better way of doing things. However, we must recognize the facts about this. 1. It destroys ethics and morals. 2. It rids us free choice regarding the commands. And 3. We honestly have no way to know if a god has issued said commands. That third one is, of course, the biggest problem at all. You or I or anyone can declare a god has issued whatever commands, and if we get people to believe us, we have a system that's above questioning, a tyranny of sorts. That might be good, it might be bad, but the people can no longer stand and say no because they're stuck in the system. They're not allowed to say no. Because I mentioned free choice, it seems I should address free will or lack thereof. At the time of this video, I am skeptical of free will and determinism. I think it might be a combination of both, but I'm fully aware that my thoughts are irrelevant to the data, and it seems that scientists are still gathering that data, so I don't know what the truth is, and I shall remain skeptical and maintain my current idea until I have either a logically coherent argument or the data to give me reason to change my ideas about free will versus determinism. To me, as I said, it seems a bit of both. I can do what seem to be arbitrary actions, like smack myself in the face, but I'm also limited by my brain chemistry. I can only retain and learn so much, say, in the field of mathematics. I'm limited to my body's abilities, i.e., I can't fly on my own power. I can only bend so far without discomfort or pain. So, although it seems like I do have some freedom of choice, I am limited. I'm also further limited by the laws of the land. If I want to maintain my freedom, I have to try to follow those laws to the best of my ability. And I'm finally limited by my own self-imposed rules, those that we call morals. And they in turn are brought into being by the ethics that I have adhered to by my own choice. I might change my ethics and thus my morals will change, or it might be that I'm so emotionally attached to what the ethics and the resulting morals are that it seems impossible for me to change it. So, I just don't know whether or not there's free will or not. Like I said, I think it's a bit of both. I could be wrong about that. You can decide, or maybe you have no choice in the matter, what you want to think about this because it's something we don't have the data on. So, until that day that the data comes, we all get to be skeptical of all three available choices, free will, not free will, or some combination thereof. We can think that any of them are true, one of them is true, none of them are true. We can think whatever we want, but the day the data comes is the day that the debates end. We have to go with what the data says, period. Because that's just the reasonable thing to do, even if we don't like what the data has to say. Finally, let me talk a little bit about the type of dialogue that I'm having in this video. This is an information exchange. This one comes in the format of a lecture, since the interaction will come after I've said my piece, and your text comments will be the way that I interact with you. Unless someone makes a video in response to this video, then the exchange becomes something different. Nonetheless, this is not a persuasionary dialogue and doesn't fall into the same sort of critical analysis you would normally hear me doing on this channel. I present no arguments here, no premises, and I left out some information about the Miller experiment that I didn't see vital to my points. As such, you're free to be skeptical of anything here. However, I am giving you information I currently have. This type of dialogue works best when you take that information and add it to whatever information you have. Perhaps you know of things I do not know and you want to tell me about those things. Perhaps you want to add a point or two or more of information that you want to add. Think of this type of dialogue in a very simplistic way. I know my favorite color. You don't know what my favorite color is. I tell you my favorite color is green, and then you tell me what your favorite color is, because I didn't know it until you tell it to me. So we've exchanged information. We now know something about the other person we didn't know before. In this case, I'm giving a more sophisticated dialogue other than what my favorite color is, and it is something that we should subject to scrutiny and critical analysis, but not in the same way that we would a persuasionary dialogue. There's a ton of fallacies in this presentation that if it was persuasionary would force you to be skeptical about it. But because it's a different type of dialogue, the sort of analysis that you should have on this type of dialogue is one where you do more research into whatever the ideas I've presented. So if you want to look into the Miller experiment, do so. If you want to look more into ethics, of course, do so. If you want to look more into morals, of course, do so. If you want to look at DCT, do so, of course. All of these things are very summarized here. So it's just a bit of information, a bit to get you started on this thought train that I want to lead somewhere. I want to give you and me and all of us something to go on, some journey to begin, and all journeys have to begin somewhere. So that's what an information exchange is all about. Okay, so ethics is way, way more complex than I've made it here. This is just the bare basics of it. But again, I hope that it gives you something to think about. Maybe you already knew about these things. Maybe this is something that you've never heard before. And hopefully it gives you a platform to begin this conversation on. And hopefully it gives us something to talk about. And that's what it should be, because it's a information exchange. It's not a debate. Now, if you want to debate me on any of these points, I welcome debate. I am open to that. PM me. We'll discuss a debate and we'll talk about what that process would be like. But in the comments below, if you want to debate me on these points, I'm just not going to respond to that. Normally I respond to most, if not all, the comments I get. But because this is an information exchange dialogue, if you want to say, well, Deconverted Man, you screwed up here, here, here. Okay, fine. Let's debate that. That's a separate thing. Let's just exchange information. It's very, very different than a persuasionary dialogue, and I hope that I'm able to convey that in a way that you'll understand. If you have any questions about how information exchange is different than persuasionary dialogue, please feel free to ask that in the text comments, and I will do my best to explain it more than I did with the brief summary of it's like telling each other our favorite colors. Thank you so much for your time and energy you've spent listening to this presentation.